Swedenborg was an 18th century Swedish scientist, philosopher, and theologian. Born 1688, died 1772. The next thing you should probably know is that he was brilliant. He was what people call a universal genius, a polymath, a Renaissance man, ahead of his time. For instance, he was a submarine designer before there was such a thing, a psychologist 140 years before Freud, an aeronautical engineer 190 years before the Wright brothers. He published 14,000 pages and left another 28,000 pages in manuscript. So he was one of those types. But perhaps the most important but also controversial thing about him was that he claimed that in his mid-50s he had a spiritual awakening that opened the afterlife to him while he was still alive in this world. He was not just alive, but functioning with indefatigable energy. You could think of him as having a near-death experience that went on for 29 years while he was living his daily life, seeing friends, participating in the Swedish government, and writing more books. They've been a source of inspiration to many great thinkers and artists since. Heaven and Hell is Swedenborg's most popular book. It tells us what it is like to die. Swedenborg says the actual experience of death is a beautiful and peaceful transition, and all people are met and welcomed by angels. He says that world is more real than this one. There's a kind of geography of love in that world. Everyone is placed according to what they truly love the most. Our choices in this world and the state of our own hearts determine our eternal outcome there. Infants and children who die grow up into young adults there, while older folks grow younger and regain their health and vigor. Swedenborg gets into the language and writing and music in that world, what the homes and environments look like, and even how things look and sound and smell. Check it out. He says that, first of all, you wake up in a beautiful world that's very much like the one you're in now. You see people who have gone on before you. Within a short while, you are in a state very much like you were in this world, and you start to alternate between that state and what he calls your inner state, a state of who you really are at your core. You go through a process of being boiled down to what that core is, with things that don't belong in that core or don't accord with it being removed over time, so that people get down to an essence that's either good or it's evil, and they find their home in either heaven or hell. There are many, many heavens arranged according to the specifics of what people love and what they believe, and many, many hells according to the particular kind of evil that they're addicted to.
Swedenborg said that as we progress toward the inner state, some ugly emotions can erupt. But to reach heaven, we need to be willing to face our hidden dark side, our selfish and destructive impulses.
If we defend and gravitate toward them, then we move closer and closer toward hell. If we see them and say, no, I don't want to be that kind of person, we move closer and closer toward heaven. Then he says that for people who ultimately choose hell, fine, that's where they go, that's where they want to be. For people who choose heaven, there's a third state, which is one of instruction, because there is so much to learn.
When we arrive in the other world, angels look at that spiritual body, which is in the complete human form, and amazing to say, they can read all the events of our lives written on there. So the traumas that we've been through, the good decisions that we made, the bad decisions, are all written on our bodies, almost as if we were a videotape, and they simply play the tape and can see in a moment the events of our lives, and most importantly, what we love and who we are. This is the book of life that's been much talked about, that you have a complete internal memory that stores everything that's happened to you, everything you said and thought and read. All the events of your life are stored in a most perfect way in your spiritual book of life.
Swedenborg reported learning that after death, the soul moves through a progression of states. The goal of this process is heaven, but it is a heaven that is quite different from what most organized religions have led us to expect. Swedenborg describes a heaven that is lively, many-leveled, and multifaceted.
Swedenborg experienced 3 levels of heaven, one that he called roughly a natural, or I prefer behavioral heaven, for people who basically don't want to probe too deeply into the nature of things. They want to be decent, caring people and lead a good, honest life. And that's all that matters to them. He saw a higher level of heaven for people who wanted really to understand themselves and other people, whose focus was on that understanding. And he saw a highest level of heaven for people who were totally, utterly, transparently loving, and who simply felt the reality, didn't have to analyze it, didn't have to probe.
The heart of Swedenborg's description of heavenly community is an intriguing view of the way they are formed.
Communities in the other world are very much different from the communities here. Here, everybody mixes and mingles together, but in the other world, it's the like-minded who band together, and the focus of the community is some particular useful service, much like the human body, where you have a purpose outside of self that community serves, and you find yourself so at home with the other people who have the same mission that you have.